All right. Well, let's jump into it. Make the most of our time. So, Luca, thank you again for joining us on the pair program.
Thanks for having me.
Of course, yeah. And so this is again a bonus episode of a mini series that we call "How We Hatched." And this is intended to be, a casual discussion to, hear a little bit more about your unique career journey and where you came from, how you arrived at the current point in your seat today as the CTO of Lightning AI. So I always like to start by, having you provide just our listeners with a quick overview of Lightning AI and, a quick hit on the problems that you're solving here.
Yeah, for sure. So Lightning comes from what was known before as Grid AI. So we recently rebranded in Lightning AI. We provide a kind of a unique blend of training abstractions. So providing a way for people to build models with by leveraging what was known before or until very recently as PyTorch Lightning, which now is the Lightning trainer abstraction within Lightning. And having at the same time a unique access to an abstracted version of the infrastructure. Right now, nowadays, if you do ML or MLOps, you have a sharp distinction between the application layer and the infra. We think that getting more leverage on the infra side from programmatically will enable people to build full ML systems without necessarily keeping those aspects separate, the infra aspect and the logic aspects. And what we really want to do is empower the developers from, the future developers from tomorrow, which will deal with AI in any shape or form, to build their systems in a way that is, as natural as writing Python code. So this is what Lightning is about. It is a open source library. You can go to GitHub and see the framework, and it has a cloud counterpart, which is Lightning Cloud, where you can run your ML systems, your Lightning apps, as we call them, and deploy them really effortlessly on the cloud or on your neat cloud.
And we'll dissect that a little bit more. We'll break that down a little bit throughout this conversation. But let's again start back a little bit. Let's backtrack here in terms of how you got into this industry. And I always am intrigued with how folks get into the world of tech. You're dialing in from Italy. Let's talk about where you grew up and again, like how you made this transition into the world of tech.
Yeah, none of this was planned, but I grew up on Lake Garda, which is a lake that is not far from here. It's between where I am today, Bergamo, in Lombardy, and Verona. There's a very nice lake. I was born there. It's a Mediterranean pocket within our region, and I get back there every summer. Essentially, when once you're born there, you tend to go back there like many other places people are born. And then I went to high school there, and I was an electronic engineering in Brescia first, and then I moved to Milan because there was this new university course, biomedical engineering, that was really interesting to me. So I did the last 3 years there, and I graduated in biomedical engineering. And the biomedical engineer is a person that applies nowadays, pretty common, but applies the methods of engineering to medicine and so on. And then I got a PhD in the same discipline, and I started doing my PhD. I started doing algorithms in the field of cardiovascular modeling and modeling blood vessels in general. So algorithms related to describing those objects in three dimensions to kind of measure them properly, applying computational geometry algorithms and then also simulating blood flow using partial differential equations. And this is how I got into the modeling side of things. Although I didn't do any machine learning back then, it was more like from equations to simulated solutions. I did my postdoc in Canada, in London, Ontario. I had a lot of fun there in 2003 and short part of 2002 and 2003. And then I got back here and I at a research institute here in Bergamo. And I started my own like small unit, small lab. And in 2009, I decided that I wanted to like see through and see like even more applied stuff. And I decided to, start my own company and, resign from my job. And a baby was coming. So this is perfect time, right? To tell your wife, hey, I'm going to resign and I'm going to start my company. But she was supportive of that. So we all decided to embark in this adventure. And I founded what is today a company of like about 60 people here in Italy that today is doing applied AI. The company is called Orobix. But we didn't do AI at the beginning. It was more, again, mathematical modeling and so on. Partly leveraging an open source library that I created when I was doing my postdoc, which is called VMTK, a vascular modeling toolkit. And it turns out that a lot of labs around the world were using it, but they needed some more engineering on top of it. So that was a good opportunity to start. But at some point, there was kind of a company that came to us with a problem that was a bit too hard for the techniques I knew back then. And so this is how we looked into machine learning first and deep learning second. And we found out that using deep learning, and this was like 2014, we could solve the problem much faster. And what we actually created didn't have anything to do with the actual problem we wanted to solve. It was much more general. So we had this realization that, maybe we should do like applied AI, from here. And so this is how, aged 38, I started to get into deep learning. And that was a pretty wild ride because I started like using, again, open source tools to do that. And I got into, contributing to PyTorch when it came out in 2017, got to know the core team and built a few other things around deep learning, Redis AI and so on. And so at the end, we said, why don't we kind of start like a small company dedicated to technology? That was Tensorwerk, which was founded in the state of New York as a spin-off from Orobix in 2019. And then shortly after, we started working with Grid AI. And this is how we met because we wanted to try things out, like Grid wanted to try things out, some of the technology, that we built for their product. And then we became a family. And this is how I got here. So that's, in a few minutes, my very serendipitous journey.
That's great. Yeah, I'm gonna break some of this down because it's a super unique, kind of zigzag journey. Starting with the fact that you're a, soon to be father, getting ready to go and did you bootstrap Orobix?
Oh yeah. Yeah, okay. For sure.
So this is your savings.
Bootstrap for a long time. Yeah.
Did you have a co-founder?
Yes, of course. We were 3 people at the time. One of them was my high school friend, who is currently the CEO of Orobix. And then there was another person who was my first master's thesis student back in 2000. And then he decided to go his own way in 2014. So my high school friend, Pietro, and I continued the adventure.
And the company, did it start as a services company at first, or were you building a product from the very beginning?
No. We were services. I'm joking that at the beginning we had competencies and like very vague ideas on what we wanted to do. So it's kind of the way you don't want to start. But at the same time, it's the way I got to learn a ton of stuff. So at the beginning it was a bit frightening, right? Because, I was doing kind of well in research, had my papers, my stuff, my collaborations. So it felt a bit like, oh my God, what am I doing, right? So I have, now I need to look for clients and so on. Like when you're on the other side, it looks like an adventure. Now, when you are in the adventure, you understand that there will be nights in which you stay up, like thinking, how you're going to get to, the next few months.
Yeah.
For a VC funded company, it's a bit different probably, but for a bootstrap company, it's a constant, struggle with, will I make it to the end of the year or not? But then we consistently did it and we grew year over year. So that was satisfying.
I always like to ask this question because I think back to my own start with Hatch, and it started as an independent consultant for a couple of years, really supporting small businesses and kind of working 80 hour weeks until I was able to get enough business to feel comfortable to hire somebody up. So I was always curious, so you came out of this research lab and your co-founder, probably had his own connections as well. Did you have business already firmed up when you started Orobix, as you had clients immediately ready to support, or did you go in with no business and you both were kind of doing BD from scratch?
Yeah, it's kind of the second thing, right? I knew a lot of people that were using the software, the open source stuff and so on. So I figure, they need help. I know that they need help, right? And they did. Some of them did. And then my co-founder as well had some, connections and so on. But yeah, it was pretty going back, probably we wouldn't have done it the same way. Yeah. It was pretty adventurous, borderline reckless. But at the same time, we needed to learn a lot. I personally still needed to learn a lot. Sure. So even, going into a very structured adventure would have taken away the breadth of things that we could do, because I learned about, back in 2009, there was this moment where a lot of NoSQL databases were coming out. So there was this, everybody was kind of looking like they built their own database somehow. So that word was completely new to me. And then Heroku came out in those years. And I remember reading the page for Heroku and even I read this, but I didn't literally understand anything about it. So it was a discovery every day. And then programming languages again, functional programming was something that I got passionate with Clojure and so on. So it was a constant discovery. Yeah, it was a very, very fun time.
And open source too, would you say that was still, somewhat fairly early stage when folks were doing, open source work and opening up their repos?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I got first into open source in 2004. So my library was released back then, but I kind of learned it from projects like VTK, Visualization Toolkit, which was what I was basing my library on, and ITK, which were projects coming out from not really GE, but there were people from GE in the medical space and visualization space. They were kind of doing that, and they were doing it high quality. So they had all the dashboards for continuous integration and so on back in 2000. So that was a great school, and I ended up knowing most of them because at some point I started contributing to a project that is called ITK is a medical imaging project, as well as Slicer. So I got into that community. Slicer is a 3D visualization software for medical imaging, and some of my stuff got integrated into Slicer. So again, it was a very, very exciting learning experience for me.
Yeah, and it's important to kind of touch on these parts of the story because when we think about what Lightning's doing today, right, and you're combining these pieces of open source, you're combining deep learning. These are the building blocks of what leads down this path of how you become a part of this new organization years later.
Yeah. I think the thing I enjoy doing the most is having two things in either end, and then realizing that two things can be put together, and you can create something that is maybe not new in absolute term, but it can advance, like it can make people's life a bit easier if they're doing certain things. So I've been always fascinated by this aspect of two consolidated things. Like I remember doing my PhD, I had a computational geometry paper in one hand and another paper in another hand, and that how I was literally printing them. I looked at them and I said, "Wait, if I put these two things together, maybe I can make an algorithm that is can be useful." And this is how the some of the center line stuff, computation stuff that I did came to be, because sometimes you cannot really plan these things, right? They come at a particular point in time because you have visibility and you can integrate information from two different sources. But it yourself, without the history, couldn't probably put the two things together. So it takes a lot of serendipity and going off on what you think is interesting in order to be able to realize in that moment in time that you can put the two things together. So you kind of have to give yourself the room to make this thing growing.
Yeah, and it's also I agree with you. I think it also comes down to timing, right? Because you were probably dabbling in deep learning before deep learning was really a big thing, right? And it's still very much an early stage kind of tech, I would say, in terms of how many companies are using this in real world scenarios. And you were using this at a time when it's still so much left for technology to kind of catch up. And I think that's interesting because you are kind of setting some groundwork here, and also I think this plays into you being a thought leader in a space that warrants being the CTO of a company that's centered around this type of technology. Yeah. So
I wouldn't regard myself as a thought leader for sure, but yeah. But
well, we would say it's some level of subject matter expert to an extent. So let's jump back into the Orobix story. So you joined in 2009 as co-founder and principal scientist, and over the years you're building this with your co-founder. Tell me, just I guess from a headcount perspective, how does this company evolve in the first few years? How quickly does it grow? And to what extent?
Not very quickly. It was a quasi-static expansion, let's say, up until some point. And that point coincided with us realizing that we needed to do applied AI. As we said it, last mile AI. And this also coincided with a challenge, right? So we decided not to do research, because as a company at the time, and even afterwards, you're either you can either sustain yourself with research, which is very hard to do, or you try to solve real world problems like we set out to do. And this taught me a lot, because we wanted to go out there, in the manufacturing space or healthcare space back in the days, and try to address the problems that needed a production deployment, which is not necessarily a technological challenge as much as it is a procedural challenge on how you get there, right? So if you have an industrial line with an inspection, you need to do inspection in an inspection machine or from a camera and so on. For quality, for your thing to be applicable, your performance needs to be super high and needs to be controlled. So no matter how high it is, it needs to be controlled so that if something changes, then you need to either compensate for it, your model needs to be robust enough, or you need to know about it. And not only that, but also the way you take your customer through the journey of adopting AI is a challenge in itself, because culturally it's a very different thing from, the classical computer vision system that, the integrator will go there and configure and so on. So we've gone through all these hurdles, which were partly, yes, making models that could perform, but also how to figure out how to, get to a point where we don't stop at the POC, because POC, I wouldn't say it's easy, but yes, it's much easier than actually going to production. And we haven't always been successful with that. But through the mistakes and through the, the labor of, trying again, I think we found like a recipe or some kind of something that can be equated to some experience baggage that you take with you on how to apply deep learning in the real world. And so this was to me very, very useful to kind of understand that the problem of applying AI goes beyond just training the latest model on image, right? Mm-hmm. And so
and you start to get exposure into how this is applied in different industries. So it's
exactly.
It was kind of proven a little bit in the medical community, and then you are expanding this into other industries. And as you're growing in this startup, you're not only learning more about the technology, but how to be a leader, probably how to grow a team, how to keep them engaged. And you were a part of this organization. Well, are you still a part of this company today, Orobix?
I'm still a co-founder. And I'm very attached to Orobix as a company, and try to give my contribution for what I can today, given my involvement with Lightning. But for sure,
it's kind of your baby, right? This was where you first kind of cut your teeth as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, and the team is fantastic. Like, we have a fantastic team that, sometimes I joke, they need to realize how great they are and how many things they know. And sometimes when you're head down on practical problems and so on, you kind of forget, and you maybe you see other kind of context as being kind of out there and thriving, but it's hard to recognize sometimes how many things and how much value you can bring to companies. So this is also something that I'm trying to do as part of an organization that has a visibility and so on, to kind of create the opportunities for people working in Orobix to interact with companies like Lightning. And we started doing that this year. There were the conditions, and I hope this comes up as opportunities for applying things that we're developing in Lightning in context for which they weren't necessarily thought at the beginning.
Sure.
So I think there's a lot of opportunities there.
Unique opportunity in terms of you're straddling two young companies, right? And through that, connecting value between the two based on you being kind of like this anchor relationship.
Hopefully, I don't want to push it, right? I don't want to force it. I just want to create the boundary conditions, because I think it would be unnatural for me to kind of push either way. But I think I see a lot of value, so I don't see how it could not happen, right?
Sure. So getting back to the how you get into Lightning, right? So it sounds like through Orobix there was a spinoff of a startup called TensorWerk. Is that accurate? In 2019,
yeah, exactly.
And you serve as the CEO. And tell us what TensorWerk is doing.
Yeah. So Orobix has a mission that is, taking AI to the last mile, very applied. And so at the same time, a couple of years earlier, I started tinkering with PyTorch wasn't out yet with TensorFlow and the concept of a database, how a database, which was something I looked into and I was very passionate with and kind of still am with Redis. Salvatore Sanfilippo is one of the most famous developers out there. He's not working at Redis anymore, but at the time we kind of met online and so on. So I got passionate about looking in the source code for Redis, and so I thought, like, what happens if you take an inference engine like what was the TensorFlow C++ library back then, and kind of equipping an in-memory database like Redis to see what comes out of that on the other side, right? Because you could store data temporarily, you can transform data while still on the database and do stuff with it. And so at some point, Redis Labs reached out and they were interested in pushing this further. And so we were having this like line of development that I kind of catered to within Orobix, but that was like pure technology, right? And then thanks to VMTK, which we talked about at the beginning, Rick Izzo, which is a colleague now at Orobix, at Lightning, sorry about that, reached out to me because he started contributing to VMTK and he said, can I do an internship at Orobix? And I said, oh, sure. But while he was there, we started talking about deep learning and all the tools that are, we're missing in the deep learning stack. So we, started brainstorming about, for example, data versioning and stuff like that. And an inference engine, but back then. And so 1 year later, we decided to say, what if we start a spin-off in the state of New York, because Rick is from the state of New York. And we start just, developing open source stuff and see how far we can get. And this is how it came to be. And very early on, Sharon Thomas, who is also at Lightning today, joined. He wrote the first book on PyTorch. And so we kind of got in touch because I happened to co-author a book on PyTorch, right? Deep Learning with PyTorch from Manning. And Manning decided the title, Deep Learning with PyTorch. And I knew that Sharon's book was Deep Learning with PyTorch from Pack. So I reached out and said, dude, I'm sorry. The editor wants to put the same title as your book. So I feel terrible. At the beginning, it was meant to be PyTorch in action. So I had no problems with that. And he said, no worries, this is cool, so cool and so on. And I said, this is a nice guy. And of course, yeah, I kind of knew him from the PyTorch Slack. And then, yeah, we got talking and he was the first engineer who joined TensorWerk. And he took over some of the Redis AI stuff and an experiment versioning project as well. So that was a fun time.
And this is at a time when it's called Grid AI. Is that correct?
This is, yeah, exactly. Grid was existing. We didn't know about it. Then COVID struck. We were all in our rooms, doing stuff, killing the time.
Yeah.
And then I got an email from Luis, one of the co-founders, and saying, I've seen what you're doing with Redis AI and TensorWerk in general. Are you interested in collaborating? And I said, yes, our first customer. And a few months later, they told us, why don't you guys join? And so we did. So that's how the story evolved. So basically at the end of 2020, and then we announced a few months later, but at the end of 2020, we ended up joining all of us. And we were initially a small team within Grid AI. And we're basically developing stuff that the core team wasn't developing at the time. So some inference stuff and so on, based on our prior work. And then, things evolved fairly quickly throughout 2021. Yeah.
And you joined as the VP of engineering?
No, I joined as the TensorWerk team, essentially. Okay. So I was a tech lead of a team of 3, including myself. And then we started working at the main product because there was the first launch of the Grid platform. And then after the launch, I stepped into a VP of engineering role in early May 2021. Mm-hmm. And then with the goal basically of improving the structure of the engineering team and kind of stabilizing the platform and so on. And that was a challenge in itself because the team was distributed, the technology was like an evolved technology, so it wasn't simple to wrap my head around. Mm-hmm. And then a few months later, after we kind of spent the time like building some of the engineering culture and team communication and patterns and finding more alignment and so on, and doing a lot of work in stabilizing the product. Like every product that gets first released comes with its own like tech debt and so on. So how do you balance that and so on? And then, I would say 6 months later, we had this realization where we haven't talked about so much. About PyTorch Lightning, which is a library where Grid originated essentially. So PyTorch Lightning, huge success in the open source world. It's one of the leading framework for building models. And it got a lot of traction. William Falcon, who's the CEO at Lightning, is the creator, and people joined him very early on and helped him in getting PyTorch Lightning off the ground, and then Grid was funded. But we had these 2 products. One was a Grid platform where you can, and still is, where you can train models. Like you can submit your code and modify. Like if it works on your laptop, it works on the platform. So you're not exposed essentially to the intricacies of the cloud. You just use the cloud to run stuff. And then PyTorch Lightning, open source, at the training abstraction level. So not so much about infra, but how you train models and so on. And we can maybe dive a bit deeper into that. But there was a little disconnect between the two. At least we felt that the journey was incomplete. So we built the Grid platform, and the Grid platform today powers Lightning for a good part as a compute abstraction. But we had a compute abstraction. We had a great training library. But how can we expand the capabilities of the people building models beyond the training in a way that will allow them to build entire systems with the same kind of flavor for APIs and for building systems that Lightning has, which is, great APIs, discoverable APIs, so that you don't have to learn 20 abstraction before you use them, but you can discover them piece by piece. And the great defaults and so on. So this is how the idea for the more the broader Lightning framework came out. And that was the
root problem that you were trying to solve.
Exactly. To empower ML engineers and ML researchers to go beyond model building itself, because, AI itself, creating with AI, building stuff with AI requires so many pieces nowadays that it's even hard to know what you should know. And for the most part, you don't know what you don't know.
Making it so accessible.
Making it accessible, like lowering the barrier for building stuff. Like focus on the building act, not on, yak shaving and learning all you need to learn to kind of compose things at the minimal, the more granular level, right? Like, how can we make it composable? Can we make people build on each other's like shoulders, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is what we wanted to achieve, and this was like November, December, and then we got into this new phase, and it was really exciting, and it was a very transformative experience, to the point that we got from Grid AI to Lightning AI.
Right.
Because in fact,
was there any funding that was already on the table, I guess, at this point, that was helping with, employing folks and getting the team together? And
so we announced our Series B very recently, and we did our Series A earlier on. Mm-hmm. So for now, for us, it was something we needed to do. We didn't come up with Grid to be in the space of end-to-end training platform. What we wanted to be was kind of transformative, like kind of generational product, like Lightning, PyTorch Lightning was for training, to empower people to create. Like, the creation act is what we're focused on. So if in the future creating software will involve, like it will, and it's partially is, the use of AI systems and so on, we want to empower developers tomorrow to leverage these things in a like low code, like programmatic way, so that you can build things without kind of necessarily wearing 100 hats in order to do that, right? To keep everything in one head. And it's really important, because the moment you do that, then the moment you make this experience composable, so that I can take something for some other person and not care about what that thing is, right? Mm-hmm. Inside, and but just have the ability to use it with something else. And you would argue, this is what software is. Actually, if you get into the ML world, in the ML space, that is not exactly the thing that happens today. If you build a DAG system, it's pretty like the experience is pretty from scratch every time. Like, then you can argue, like, there are ways of facilitating this task, but it doesn't feel the same way as when you're building software in other domains. So.
Sure. Yeah, and it's a group of folks that you're assembling that I'd imagine are very much behind this mission, right? We would equate it to it's a very mission-driven company, and the folks that you're attracting are very passionate about this problem that you're solving. So to bring it back to kind of like where things sit today, what is the lay of the land, I guess, from a tech perspective, in terms of who you all are from a size and how the teams are kind of set up and distributed? I'm kind of curious to hear that from you directly.
Yeah. So the transformation that we just came from, also came with with us reaching a level of maturity that recently increased by one notch. So last year I was VP of engineering. I pushed for creating 3 teams. One was the frameworks team, so more on the open source side, PyTorch Lightning, and the ecosystem, and the application team and the platform team. Application was everything from like microservices to front end and CLI. And then platform was everything related to compute. So compute facing. So Kubernetes, provisioning using Terraform and cloud, essentially cloud APIs. And there's a ton of complexity down there for sure. So that was one of the most challenging parts. And like as a team structure, we had one manager per team. So it's kind of a simplified layout. And we push for having every engineer, like simple things, like every engineer should hear what they have to do from one person, not multiple, which is like, sounds like a no-brainer, but sometimes communication patterns affect the way, even people are aligned around what's important in a major way. So, but at that point where we figured out where we wanted to go and what we wanted to do, at the same time, I felt that it was a time for us at the end of this transformation to kind of have access to people that had like a vast experience in scaling engineering teams, which I haven't done, like past the scales that we're at. So I think there are certain situations in which you can build your own like experience based on your own mistakes, like the early days at Orobix, right?
Sure.
But some other situations in which it's better to kind of call the person that has done it at least 2 or 3 times. And so this is what we did. We looked for a VP of engineering, a VP of product that could kind of take us to the next level. And that was a very good move. Right now we're in the process of structuring and getting us organized for what's going to come in terms of organization. So
you were essentially hiring your backfill, hiring somebody that's going to come and take in your place as VPE, and there's a level of just humbling yourself and saying like I know I'm not this person to scale this team. We need somebody who's got the chops that really has been there in this type of role. We see that common in a lot of startups of like kind of knowing when to fire yourself from one position and bring in somebody that is an expert in that specific stage.
Yeah. I mean, you kind of feel it, right? So where you kind of used common sense and your experience, and that's like you start seeing the shortcomings and without necessarily having things not work, but at the same time, kind of recognizing that if the scale increases past the critical point, the next critical point, then you will not be the right person for the job.
Sure.
So that's absolutely essential to me as an experience. And then I was lucky to kind of have the opportunity to step in the CTO role, which allows me to kind of having a very experienced VP of the engineer in the company to play a more like cross-functional function, at the same time have the opportunity to kind of contribute with some of the technical stuff as well. So I mean, it's a very lucky circumstance, I would say, at this point.
Yeah, it's a different way of how many startups kind of start, right? They'll sometimes originally start with that CTO kind of co-founder, and then they need to bring in a VP of engineering at a certain point where it's you kind of started in the VPE slot and went into the CTO slot.
I'm not a co-founder, right? So I had a very like non-classical induction into this.
Sure.
But with Will, we have we share a lot of the vision and with the team as well. Like I'm very lucky to work with amazingly talented individuals, like much beyond what I can provide myself. So so it's a really fortunate circumstance, and I do my best to kind of be there for like providing context and help seeing things from certain angles, but the team is is amazing. So my duty essentially is trying to keep things aligned on the vision and provide some of the ingredients, but that's a very much of an alignment exercise that then can push us forward.
Sure.
Being aligned, of course, goes without saying, comes with being able to make determinations independently because you're aligned, you know what you got. So
yeah, it's a super it's a challenge as you get bigger, ensuring like that vision gets transferred down to others. And so is one of the questions I wanted to ask you. But I real quick to bring it into the current. So you guys received a Series B recently. It was about 40 million Series B. And what is the headcount today of Lightning?
It's about 60 people, between 50 and 60 people.
And what are
I'm not prepared on the exact one. Sorry.
Okay. But general range of percentage of folks that are, you would say are technical. What does that look like?
Yeah, it's a high percentage of people are technical. I would say that it's about between 30 and 40 engineers in an IC capacity. We have 3 engineering managers right now and 1 VP of engineering. We have a product team that is evolving, and we pride ourselves to be very product led. Mm-hmm. So even the sprint planning and so on, it's all road mapping goes without saying. But even at the sprint level, we have a very, very tight cooperation between product and engineering, to the point that I spent maybe more time with product than with engineering at some point. And it's I think that's a culture that I would like to keep and increase if possible.
Yeah. So how do these teams collaborate if they're everybody's pretty distributed globally? How do you keep folks? I guess everything from does everybody have a certain time zone they need to kind of be online and be available, and stand ups and all of those things? How are you all staying in sync?
Yeah, it's a never evolving quest to find the best equilibrium there. We are spread indeed in many time zones, from India or coming from Japan, India, and then some Central Asia, and then Europe, East Coast, West Coast,
mm-hmm.
and in between the two coasts. But at the same time, we've been doing it forever. Forever in startup time, which is 1 year and a half, 2 years. But so we require, we kind of find the time to be online at a certain moments. Different teams do it slightly different right now, but we also have moments in which more the whole of the company is online, and but we are also very attentive, I would say, to balance, especially after the launch that we did. So before the launch was every launch, there was a big crunch time in different capacities, but everybody gave 150% there for a few weeks. But now we know that we're in for a game that is fast paced. At the same time, it needs to be sustainable. So I don't see it as a net positive that people are constantly always online. So we try to actually cut down on chat communication, like Slack communication. Recently, we decided to kind of keep it moderate and have more time to focus and so on, and have a more asynchronous way of communicating. But we are keeping the checks like daily or every other day, depending on the rituals. Because we need to see each other. We need to kind of have the pulse. So it's a game of equilibrium. I don't believe in pendulum being this way or that other way. There's always like a fine tuning, and sometimes you fine tuning in one direction and then you realize you need to move. I think the most important thing is recognizing what's happening and patterns and reacting to those.
Yeah, and you've stuck to a style from the start. I think is an interesting approach where it's not like everybody was in an office and then you had to quickly convert to remote. Right? This started pretty distributed, and imagine because of that, you probably look for certain skills. When hiring, if it's a level of autonomy and where they distribute or display that in the past. But I guess how would you describe like an ideal skill set that translates to a successful technologist at Lightning? What are some of those traits look like?
That's interesting for sure. It's an interesting question. I would say being open-minded and being available for taking suggestions, not just from your manager, but from colleagues, with non-defensive, and at the same time trying to not be wrapped around your own initial idea, right? And but still like defend, like come to something that you believe in and kind of be able to defend it, but also change your mind along the way. Be kind of uncompromising on the quality that you want to deliver. Maybe you cannot deliver it all the time, but and at the same time, find a good balance between speed of execution and how like confident you are in the solution that you found. And I would say one of the characteristics we want people to develop, even if they don't come with this characteristic, is be user obsessed or user focused. And it's not something that everybody has, or maybe some people think they have it, but they don't really have it. Some others, maybe because they come from an open source background, or maybe because of their own background, they have it in them. So it's a skill set that becomes like a non-option that you can either develop or have it in you.
Who would you describe as your?
I don't know if I addressed everything that you wanted to know.
you definitely touched on it, and I would say too, who would you describe as your users then?
That's a very good question. It was easier a few months ago.
Right.
I would say that what we built is for people that need to. So we've ranged from the researcher, which was what PyTorch Lightning was created for originally, right? But then it got adopted. Like a researcher is not necessarily the academic researcher. It's a person that needs to create something new out of some material they have and make it so that it behaves like that, it works as well as possible. But then now we're going into the into a territory where we are enabling people that build models to do more. So the whole premise of Lightning is expand the capabilities of people that are building models beyond building models and into systems. So Lightning apps are distributed systems in themselves, for which you don't need to worry about how the distributed component communicate with each other, how you deploy them, how to pass payloads between them, and so on. All you need to to focus on is on execution logic. And by doing so, we're kind of empowering these people to like build complex systems that can, execute things on remote machines and then, bring back results, or, bring up distributed systems for training, and then, maybe orchestrate some other service that will do serving and so on. So I would say that the users are all the people that need to build software products that have AI in them, and they need to do it with the least amount of cognitive overhead as possible. That maybe in the future, or even at present day, includes people that today do ML ops, because they need to kind of get down at the Kubernetes level to make things happen. But maybe tomorrow they will not need to if they don't have to. If they have to, they can. Or people like data engineers that build DAG systems, and maybe they will continue to build DAG systems for specific things, but maybe build reactive distributed systems with Lightning AI that kind of surpass the concept of DAG and take it to more React style programming for distributed system, so that now they can do more to maybe orchestrate DAGs along the way. So I think what we built kind of can empower people working on every piece of the MLOps kind of or the ML lifecycle. But we will strategically focus on a few of the blocks and then go from there. But of course, we welcome everybody that is interested in this kind of concepts to kind of engage at any point of the life cycle, of course.
Well, I think this comes back to the root of, you hire folks that are obsessed with the mission of what you're doing. And so you want folks that are user obsessed, right? They're building for the users. And the good news is, you're hiring those builders that are building for other builders, right? So it's easy to kind of connect those dots of, when you're bringing somebody on. For one, I would imagine, you're attracting a certain type of engineer because they see that and they probably used a lot of some of these tools and they get excited about that. So when you compare what Lightning is as a company versus maybe there's this just call it just this generic little B2C app that's out there, like a fintech type of app. There's a lot of you can dissect a lot of differences here in terms of the types of individuals that you have to sell versus you almost like you're organically kind of going to attract that type of talent because of the fact that you're working within those communities. Is that accurate? Does that make sense?
That's pretty accurate. Yeah, for sure. Of course, you end up attracting different people for different reasons, but sure. I think there's a pattern there for sure, which is great, and I think it's going to kind of increase in the future as our footprint will kind of expand into other parts of the life cycle, but with the same kind of imprinting, right?
Sure.
I like what you said about builders that build for other builders. At the same time, Lightning apps that we're building today will be useful in themselves. Because they are themselves products, right? So right now you can actually build a product on our platform, and it can be open source or it can be closed source, right? So you can actually, speed up the time from an idea to where you have the system actually running and doing things. And so like all the people that are using Grid today will have the opportunity to do much of similar things in Lightning, with the added benefit that now they will have an extensible platform that will allow them to code their way to greater complexity instead of patching things up with bash scripts here and there, right? So I think that's why I'm really excited, because when you can leverage mechanisms like composition and so on, that's where some of the magic can happen, and the tools go beyond what you initially thought they would have to do. So that's a magic thing. And I hope it happens this time as well.
And it sounds like, so you guys have some exciting ideas about, how the product should evolve, some of the features. What would you say is one of the bigger challenges that you face going into the next, say, 12 months? And it doesn't necessarily have to be pure technical. You can look at this from a simple growth perspective.
Yeah.
I'm curious on
very
what you
seldom
see.
Purely technical.
Anything that keeps you up at night when you think about, the next 12 months of growth?
Well, luckily I am a very sound sleeper. So I very seldom stayed up at night. But
I was gonna say I take a lot of melatonin, so it kind of helps me when I think through
absolutely.
our growth.
You need to sleep, right? Yeah, absolutely. So I think the main thing you need to do, which is easier said than done, is to achieve the right amount of focus. Because the moment you can do a lot of things, it doesn't mean that you need to do them all at once, right? But of course, this comes with the choice of what to do first and what to do next. And so how you sequence things needs to be something that you kind of, have trust in, to the point that you want, like make abrupt changes if you see conditions like morphing, like in the vicinity of where they were. Of course, if everything changes, you need to reconsider your strategy. But keeping the focus is also means that you can deliver products with a higher quality and so on. So I think it's we are in a very fortunate position right now, because, we have a product we truly believe in, which we think is transformative. We need to get, more people using it, and, more industry trying it out and so on. So it's a good problem to have. And so we need to keep like this kind of mindset, but at the same time, have our own kind of idea on how to kind of do what I said at the beginning, which is empower the users that believe in us today, that use PyTorch Lightning in the industry and in the community, to do more and more. And this is, I think, the right kind of strategy that we want to pursue. And this is what you will see from the outside, and in the next few months.
Very cool. I did some digging on your careers page, and I have to give you a compliment in terms of maybe one of the most thorough job descriptions I've ever seen. Was some that came from your all's. I don't know if it's your people team is doing a fantastic job with this, but it's very clear that you take care of your team members through benefits and perks. Talk to me about, from a culture perspective, what do you love about Lightning's culture?
I think that, well, first of all, the job descriptions and so on. Yeah, we have an amazing people team, as we have amazing marketing team, product and so on, sales and support. So I think the thing I value the most is really, being around such, nice and dedicated people. So, and I put nice first and dedicated second, because I think, it must be a pleasure to kind of, go, like, take the journey together, because it's, much of it is the journey, and of course we are on a mission and so on, but you really need to enjoy every day. So from a culture standpoint, I would say this is very related. What I just said is very related to the culture part, right? So, and sometimes it's hard, you're faced with challenges, with hard decisions and so on. So it's not always like kumbaya, right? But at the same time, there's a trust that that I think we developed in each other that allows us to speak freely about problems, but not, do it in a pretentious way, like, politicking your way through things, but in a very candid way. So I think that to me, aside from being user obsessed and so on, is the culture we want to maintain moving forward. So the good thing about this is that people that are not a culture fit stick out like a sore thumb, right? Mm-hmm. Because it's really evident. Then certain dynamics come out, and they're really easy to spot. And I wouldn't say, again, with the pendulum, right? Radical candor is, yes, it's nice in theory, but sometimes you need to kind of figure things out in a small group of people, and then kind of lead or prepare others to listen to the story without exposing everyone at the same time to the same thing, because not everyone is prepared to listen to something. Usually when you tell something to someone, you need to have done the prep work before to kind of prepare the context for that something to be received in a good way. And I experimented it in my past, where I was kind of pushing a vision, but I remember a few people weren't prepared for it, and you can see that it's not getting on the other side. Either it's devoid of content, or it's actually a different content because it gets on the other side. And it's not because people are not good listeners. It's not because you don't talk correctly, but you didn't do the prep work. They're taking the people to a place where they could listen to you. So I think that's having this kind of transparency is good, provided that you do the prep work. And so this is something I take at heart. And I try to kind of I think this is shared with the managers that we have, so I don't want to take any credit there. But I think it's a common kind of culture and something we try to facilitate.
Sure.
Because context is so important to transmit in the correct way. And when there is where's this opportunity to be very open and at the same time respectful, that's where you feel like you're a team that can do anything at that point.
Yeah, I mean, it also always it has to start from the top down as well, right? That leadership has to kind of embody some of those values and hire with that intention. Otherwise, it's easy for you to lose that culture early on. So. And I think another thing that stands out too is, you all are a globally distributed team. So you're getting a lot of, a diverse crew coming in that is coming from all walks of life. And, I think there's something really fascinating about that. I think people, they want to, they want that, I think it's obviously something that every company needs to be mindful of, in this day and age is, hiring a diverse team and knowing the stats are out there that, it converts to success more so than if you don't do that. So you all are hiring, literally around the globe. And because of that, you're bringing in a really diverse crew, which I think, just creates a little bit more of an interesting culture. Right. So.
Yeah, for sure. It's, the diversity of the culture never needs to be confused with, not keeping a tab on certain prerequisites that the interactions need to have. Mm-hmm. So basically, there's no excuse for certain behaviors, right? No matter where you come from, but at the same time, I would say that this was never a problem in itself. So it's more about finding people that kind of fit the general, I wouldn't say culture, because when you say culture, it comes also with the land, right? But I think it's a human predisposition rather than culture, because culture can differ, but the human predisposition towards the other people and towards what they do, it's something we need to recognize and hire as a function of it.
It's one of the easy, it sounds like a very simple thing. It's in fact, it's something that we kind of embody here at Hatch too. It's like, I just hire nice people. I don't want to hire jerks. And it sounds like so simple to say out loud, but the reality is, everybody here, it treats everybody with a certain level of respect. Nobody, has, too much of a guard up, right? We don't take ourselves too seriously. These are the types of things that, and I speak with every person that we bring on as well. Like we're fortunate to be at a size, right? We're, small enough to where that's not an obstacle. And so it's really easy to kind of continue to bring in these types of individuals. And it sounds like, that just kind of struck a bell with me when you said, like, we hire nice people. Like it's a theme, right? It shouldn't, you don't want to bring in folks that are gonna, all it takes is one.
It's much harder to correct for that, right? It's much harder to correct for bad behavior than for the fact that you don't know Kubernetes API, right? Of course, if you are a bad coder, probably you won't be hired, but it's also on us to recognize that. But
yeah, but all it takes is one bad apple to spoil the bunch. So
it's so hard, and it's so hard to kind of get back to where you want it to be, because then it's a lot of domino effect. I've seen it happening sometimes, so it's not particularly, not in this particular case, but there are some situations that are really hard to recover, or sometimes they're kind of easier than expected to recover. But it's always a big unknown. It's a big risk. So
sure,
yeah.
I want to close with you all are growing, and I'd love to just, if you want to kind of spitball the types of roles that you're currently, kind of hiring for at Lightning, and then we can kind of wrap it up and close from there.
Yeah. So we are growing, let's say, for now with a slow pace, but we're certainly looking for people. We have platform roles, front end full stack. We tend to hire full stack, and also we're interested in people that are passionate about open source for sure. In that case, we look for a Python background. On the platform application, we prefer to use Go. So this is the kind of stack that we have. And let's say if there's a lot to build, and as a function of what we will build as a sequence of things that we will tackle, there will be opportunities also from people from other backgrounds that are not like ML researchers, that will help us, for example, in the data engineering space and so on, a bit more in the future, that will need to help us kind of expand into territories that we haven't particularly been in the recent past. So we are also we already have people from that background, but it's something that we might also want to grow more.
Very nice. And I'd imagine these positions are showcased on your careers page. We can include that in the show notes as well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And if there's anything else that you wanted to add before we close, feel free to go for it now. But I just wanted to thank you for sharing your story. I think it's a fascinating journey that touches on a lot of things, not just from how you're impacting how technology is becoming more and more innovative in the spaces of AI, machine learning, deep learning, but just those learning lessons along the way. I think those are the things that really stand out. When you speak with a CTO, a lot of folks that maybe come to interview, right? it's easy to be intimidated, but the reality of the situation is, you know, you're just a person, a human being that went through your journey, and it's important to share that. So I think, thank you for
sure.
that.
It was, a very, fortunate sequence of circumstances, but the best is yet to come. So,
that's right.
It was always a build-up in what's going to come in the near future. So we're always projected there. For sure.
Well, we're standing by. We're ready to follow it. So we're excited for you. Thank you for spending time with us.
Thanks for having me. It was great.